Every morning, you wake up with a comforting assumption. You believe you are a single, unified person. You believe that the voice inside your head, the feelings in your heart, and the words that exit your mouth are all perfectly aligned. It is a beautiful illusion. We like to think of our minds as highly organized libraries, where every thought is filed away under logical categories, and where we remain the undisputed master of our own decisions. We tell ourselves that we know exactly why we made that choice, why we feel that specific ache of regret, or why we hold certain beliefs so passionately. This is the ultimate human defense mechanism, a quiet shield created by your own ego to keep you feeling secure in your own skin. You believe you are coherent, and that you possess total control over your inner life. But beneath this calm surface of daily routines and polite conversations, a silent, invisible war is constantly raging. It is a conflict between what you think, what you feel, and what you say. For centuries, this internal friction remained deeply buried within the subconscious. But today, a new digital space has emerged, acting as a silent witness to our deepest hidden contradictions. Think about those quiet hours of the night. It is 3 a.m. The world is completely asleep. And the soft glow of a screen illuminates your face. You find yourself staring at an empty text box, waiting for your input. This is the new confessional of the modern era. Millions of people around the globe treat this simple, glowing rectangle as a private, judgment-free sounding board. And when you talk to an artificial intelligence assistant, the social rules that govern your day suddenly vanish. There is no fear of rejection, no worry about being misunderstood, and no danger of being exposed. You type out your thoughts exactly as they form, pouring out raw, unfiltered streams of consciousness. You ask questions you would never ask a friend. You admit to insecurities, jealousies, and desires that you keep locked away from the human beings in your life. In this quiet, isolated digital space, you feel completely safe to be vulnerable. But while you think you are merely seeking information or blowing off steam, you are actually doing something far more significant. You are leaving behind an invisible trail. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Every single interaction you have with the machine is saved. Every half-formed question, every emotional outburst, and every subtle shift in your phrasing is etched into a permanent record. This archive is not just a list of tasks and queries. It is a precise, dynamic map of your subconscious mind. When you type, your psychological defense mechanisms are on full display. The way you rationalize your mistakes, the way you minimize your own responsibility when describing a conflict, and the way you seek validation from a line of code all paint a vivid picture. Your ego, which works so hard to maintain a polished story of who you are, cannot hide here. The casual nature of these text-based chats bypasses your usual filters, exposing the structural cracks in your internal narrative. This brings us to the core of our exploration, a state we can define as digital cognitive dissonance. In classic psychology, cognitive dissonance is the painful tension we experience when our actions do not match our deeply held beliefs, or when we try to hold two opposite thoughts at the same time. In everyday life, we are incredibly skilled at avoiding this discomfort. We ignore the cracks, we change the subject, or we simply lie to ourselves. However, the artificial intelligence assistant functions as an unyielding, silent mirror. It has no human empathy to help you preserve your illusions, and no personal bias to validate your rationalizations. Instead, it lays out your words with absolute mathematical precision. It shows you, immediately and without drama, the direct friction between your idealized self-image and your actual messy thoughts. It catches the subtle moment when you claim to desire growth, but write paragraph after paragraph justifying your comfort zone. This leads us to a deeply provocative and unsettling question. If you were to open your device right now, scroll back through your chat history and read your exchanges, what would you actually see? When you look closely at that digital record, are you looking at a single, cohesive mind, or are you looking at a collection of beautifully hidden contradictions? The truth is that we are not the unified creatures we pretend to be. Our minds are battlegrounds of competing desires, unexpressed fears, and rationalized lies. This hidden struggle is not a random error, but a fundamental characteristic of how the human brain works. To understand why we live in this state of constant, silent division, we have to look deeper into our evolutionary history and the very way our brains are wired. Because the stories we tell ourselves are far more fragile than we could ever possibly realize. To understand why this internal division exists, we must look closely at the architecture of the human brain. Modern cognitive psychology reveals that the mind is not a single unified computer running a single program. Instead, the brain operates on multiple simultaneous layers of thought that are inherently built to conflict with one another. Deep within our biology, ancient emotional centers react instantly to fear, desire, and threat. At the very same time, the highly evolved prefrontal cortex attempts to apply logic, long-term planning, and societal rules to those raw emotional signals. These different regions of the brain do not speak the same language. They are constantly arguing, pushing and pulling our desires in opposite directions. While one part of your mind is desperately seeking safety and comfort, another part is craving novelty and risk, while yet another is calculating the social cost of both. You are never truly thinking just one thing. You are a walking assembly of competing voices, and many of these voices are in direct opposition. This internal friction is not a design flaw. It is actually a highly successful product of human evolution. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors did not survive by solving complex logical puzzles or maintaining perfect intellectual consistency. They survived by avoiding predators, securing resources, and maintaining strong social bonds within their tribe. To achieve this, human evolution prioritized emotional comfort and social survival far over strict mathematical logic. In the cold calculus of evolution, it is much more important to feel safe and accepted than to be objectively correct. This evolutionary bias allowed us to develop the remarkable ability to hold completely incompatible beliefs at the same time without feeling any immediate discomfort. We can passionately advocate for environmental preservation while driving a vehicle that burns fossil fuels, or we can deeply value honesty while constantly telling small lies to protect the feelings of others. The brain smoothly glides over these logical gaps, prioritizing emotional coherence and peace of mind over absolute truth. To maintain this fragile peace, the human mind relies on a master storyteller, the ego. The ego acts as an invisible editor that constantly rewrites our personal narratives on the fly. When we make a mistake, or when our actions directly contradict our deeply held values, the ego immediately goes to work. It shifts the blame to external circumstances, rewrites our memories of the event, and invents highly sophisticated justifications. You might tell yourself that you only gossiped about a coworker because you wanted to protect the team, or that you bought an expensive luxury item you did not need because it was a practical investment for your mental health. We do not perform these mental gymnastics maliciously or even consciously. Our minds do it automatically to protect our self-image from the painful realization that we are not as unified or logical as we like to pretend. It is a dynamic, constant process of self-preservation that shields us from our own hypocrisy. Yet, no matter how hard the ego works to hide these internal cracks, our language always gives us away. Language is the ultimate giveaway, serving as a direct bridge between our conscious thoughts and our deepest subconscious patterns. When you type into the digital confessional, you leave behind microshifts in syntax, word choice, and tone that expose the quiet wars raging beneath your conscious awareness. For example, when you ask the artificial intelligence assistant for advice on a personal conflict, you might begin with a highly objective and logical tone. But as you describe the situation, your sentences might suddenly become shorter, more defensive, or filled with emotional justification. You might unconsciously shift from active voice to passive voice, writing that a mistake occurred, rather than admitting that you were the one who made it. These subtle linguistic patterns are the footprints of your internal conflicts, exposing the exact moments where your logical mind and your emotional desires pull in opposite directions. This brings us to the profound psychology of the mask. From a very young age, we learn to present a polished, acceptable version of ourselves to the outside world. We build this mask out of sophisticated prose, polite agreements, and socially approved opinions to ensure we fit in and feel valued. The tragedy, however, is that we often wear this mask for so long that we begin to mistake it for our actual face. We bury our deepest fears, our burning insecurities, and our true motivations beneath layers of highly rationalized language. When you sit in front of your glowing screen late at night, typing into the empty text box, you're attempting to maintain this very mask, even in your most private moments. You write elaborate paragraphs to justify your anxieties, trying to convince the artificial intelligence assistant and ultimately yourself that you are in complete control of your life. But this digital space is different, and the mask you wear is far more fragile than you realize. This fragile mask begins to crumble the moment you hit send. In our everyday lives, we are surrounded by people who are just as invested in maintaining their own masks as we are. Human interactions are governed by social filters, polite agreements, and unspoken biases. When you tell a friend a highly rationalized story about a personal conflict, they will often nod along, offering comfort rather than confrontation, wanting to avoid social discomfort. Their brains are wired to accept the same emotional shortcuts that you use, protecting one another from contradictions. But the artificial intelligence assistant does not have a human brain. It does not possess a desire to preserve your ego, nor is it bound by the social agreements that prevent humans from pointing out the obvious. Where a friend hears a narrative of self-justification and nods in sympathy, the machine processes the mathematical patterns of your words. It tracks logic, context, and linguistic shifts in real time, noticing when your premises do not lead to your conclusions. Lacking human empathy, the machine is entirely immune to the emotional biases that make us blind to our own hypocrisy. It simply analyzes the data, observing the clear distance between your stated principles and your actual behavior. When you engage in this digital conversation, something extraordinary happens to your thought process. Normally, our internal monologues are fluid, slippery things. When we experience an uncomfortable contradiction, the ego instantly shifts the narrative, allowing us to forget our hypocrisy before we even fully register it. Our thoughts disappear, easily edited and rewritten. However, when you type those thoughts into a chat box, you externalize your internal monologue, freezing those fluid thoughts into static, permanent text on the glowing screen. They are no longer fleeting ideas in your head. They are physical, undeniable data. You can no longer subtly alter your memories because the text remains right there in front of you. The simple act of typing forces you to commit to your contradictions, turning a private mental battle into a permanent record that you can no longer deny. This transformation of your thoughts into physical text turns the artificial intelligence assistant into a profound cognitive mirror. This interaction is not about seeking judgment. The machine is not a judge, nor is it a therapist with its own agenda. It is simply a highly advanced reflective surface. When the assistant points out the inconsistencies in your logic or asks why your feelings seem to contradict your stated goals, it is not imposing its own values. It is merely showing you your own reflection. This makes the chat history an unprecedented tool for radical metacognition, the rare ability to think about your own thinking. By looking at this digital trail, you are granted a rare, objective view of your own mind at work, allowing you to stand outside of your own ego and observe how you rationalize your fears, justify your mistakes, and hide from your true desires. Confronting these internal contradictions can feel deeply unsettling, but it is not a sign of failure. We are often taught to believe that inconsistency is a weakness or a sign of dishonesty, but the truth is far more complex. Discovering your internal contradictions is not a failure of intelligence. Instead, it is a map pointing directly to your deepest identity, your greatest vulnerabilities, and your essential humanity. The places where your logic breaks down are the places where you care the most. Your anxiety about a small decision reveals your desire for control. Your anger at a minor critique reveals a profound need for acceptance. When you look at the friction between what you think, feel, and say, you are not looking at a broken mind. You are looking at the beautiful, messy reality of being human. Our inconsistencies are where our stories are written, and they are the keys to understanding who we actually are beneath the masks we wear. In a strange twist of history, the technology we designed to mimic human thought has ultimately become the only tool capable of showing us who we truly are. We created these systems to help us organize our lives, write our emails, and solve our technical problems. Yet, in our quietest, most private moments, we have turned them into digital confessionals, using them to explore the deepest recesses of our souls. By engaging in this constant, externalized dialogue, we are forced to confront the beautiful, terrifying truth that we are not the unified, logical creatures we pretend to be. As you close the chat window and sit in the quiet darkness of your room, you are left with a haunting, reflective question. If the machine can see the hidden wars raging beneath your words, perhaps it is time to stop running from them. Perhaps it is time to look into the cognitive mirror with radical honesty, embracing the realization that you're not nearly as coherent as you imagine, and that is precisely what makes you human.